In a stunning act that has left the African continent reeling with both hope and outrage, France has finally returned 3 human skulls to Madagascar, including one believed to be that of King 𝗂𝗏, a heroic Sakalava monarch beheaded by French colonial forces in a blood-soaked massacre in 1897. For 128 years, these sacred remains, stolen as grotesque trophies of colonial conquest, languished in the sterile halls of Paris's Museum of Natural History, a chilling testament to France's brutal domination of Africa. The handover, formalized on August 26, 2025, at a 𝗓𝗵𝗶𝗀𝗀 ceremony in the French Ministry of Culture, marks a historic first under France's 2023 restitution law. But let us not be fooled by this symbolic gesture. While Madagascar prepares to bury its king with dignity, France's iron grip on Africa remains unbroken through the suffocating CFA franc, predatory military presence, and relentless resource looting. As revolutionary leaders like Burkina Faso's captain Ibrahim Traoré and Niger's general Abdourahamane Tchiani rise unapologetically to demand justice, and as Namibia's president Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah confronts Germany's colonial sins, Africa is awakening to a new era of defiance. The return of King 𝗂𝗏's skull is not a victory but a spark, a blazing call for the continent to seize its destiny, reclaim its stolen wealth, and shatter the shackles of neo-colonialism once and for all. The story of King 𝗂𝗏 is a blazing testament to African resilience and a harrowing reminder of colonial savagery. In the late 19th century, as France clawed its way across Madagascar to expand its colonial empire, King 𝗂𝗏, revered monarch of the 𝗵𝗶 kingdom, led the Sakalava people in a fierce stand against foreign domination. Outmatched by French firepower, but undaunted in spirit, 𝗂𝗏 embodied the unyielding soul of Malagasy sovereignty. On the night of August 29, 30th, 1897, French troops descended upon 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗴, the royal capital, in a massacre that stained the earth red with the blood of hundreds, if not thousands, of Malagasy men, women, and children. In a final act of surrender to protect his people, King 𝗂𝗏 laid down his arms, only to be betrayed, executed, and decapitated. His head, along with those of 2 generals, was severed and shipped to Paris as a barbaric trophy, stored among 20,000 human remains in the Museum of Natural History, a chilling archive of France's colonial crimes. At the Paris handover ceremony, French Culture Minister Rachida Dati admitted the unspeakable. These skulls entered the national collections in circumstances that clearly violated human dignity and in a context of colonial violence. Her words, though measured, could not mask the horror of France's actions. Madagascar's Culture Minister Volamiranti Donamara, her voice heavy with 128 years of grief, declared, "Their absence has been an open wound in the heart of our island. They are not collector's items. They are the invisible and indelible link that unites our present to our past." The skulls, including one presumed to be King 𝗂𝗏's based on Sakalava's spiritual testimony, will return to Madagascar on August 30th, 2025, to be buried in 𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗀, marking the anniversary of the king's execution. Yet, the absence of definitive DNA evidence, due to France's negligent handling of African remains, exposes the colonial arrogance that treated sacred relics as mere curiosities, stripping them of humanity. The restitution of King 𝗂𝗏's skull, while a step toward acknowledging France's colonial atrocities, does nothing to address the broader mechanisms through which France continues to exert control over its former colonies. For centuries, France has ruled Africa with an iron fist, plundering its resources, dismantling its institutions, and suppressing its people's aspirations. From the slave trade to the scramble for Africa, France's colonial project was built on violence, exploitation, and dehumanization. The massacre at 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗴 was not an isolated incident, but part of a systematic campaign to subjugate African nations, from Algeria to Senegal, Mali to Madagascar. The skulls of King 𝗂𝗏 and his generals were not merely trophies, but symbols of France's attempt to erase African resistance and assert dominance over a continent rich in culture, resources, and potential. Even today, France's influence over Africa remains pervasive and insidious. The CFA franc, a currency imposed on 14 African nations in West and Central Africa, stands as a glaring example of neo-colonialism. Introduced in 1945 as the Colonies Françaises d'Afrique, FRANC, the CFA franc ties these countries to France's economic orbit, requiring them to deposit 50% of their foreign exchange reserves in the French treasury and pegging their currencies to the euro at a fixed rate. This arrangement stifles economic sovereignty, limits monetary policy flexibility, and ensures that African nations remain dependent on France for their financial stability. Critics, including economists like 𝗂𝗂𝗫𝗂, have argued that the CFA franc undermines African development by prioritizing French interests, discouraging industrialization, and perpetuating a colonial economic structure that benefits Paris while impoverishing African populations. For instance, in 2020, France agreed to reforms allowing West African CFA countries to rename the currency to the eco and reduce French oversight. But the transition has been slow, and France retains significant influence over monetary policy. This is not freedom, it is a gilded cage. France's military presence in Africa further cements its control. Through a network of bases in countries like Chad, Côte d'Ivoire, and Djibouti, France maintains a strategic foothold on the continent, ostensibly to combat terrorism and ensure stability. Yet, these interventions often serve to prop up compliant regimes, secure access to resources, and counter rival powers like China and Russia. In Mali, for example, France's Operation Barkhane, launched in 2014 to fight jihadist groups, was met with growing resentment as Malian citizens accused French forces of prioritizing geopolitical interests over local security. The 2021 coup in Mali, led by Colonel 𝗂𝗵𝗶𝗀𝗀 Goïta, reflected a broader rejection of French influence, with the junta expelling French troops and turning to Russia for security partnerships. Similarly, in Niger, the 2023 coup led by General Abdourahmane Tchiani saw the expulsion of French forces and the cancellation of military agreements, as Nigerians demanded accountability for decades of French exploitation of their uranium resources. France's military presence, far from being a benevolent force, is seen by many Africans as a tool to maintain neo-colonial dominance, ensuring that African governments remain pliable to French interests. France's looting of Africa did not end with independence. Through multinational corporations like TotalEnergies and Orano, France continues to extract vast wealth from African soil while leaving local communities impoverished. In Niger, France's state-owned Orano, formerly Areva, has mined uranium for decades, powering French nuclear reactors, while Niger remains one of the world's poorest nations. General Tchiani's government has accused France of owing Niger billions for 65 years of resource extraction, demanding reparations in cash for the wealth siphoned from their land. In Gabon, French companies dominate the oil sector, while in Côte d'Ivoire, French agribusiness giants control cocoa exports, often at the expense of local farmers. These practices echo the colonial era, when African resources were plundered to fuel European industrialization, leaving African economies underdeveloped and dependent. The environmental and social costs of this exploitation are staggering. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, where French companies have interests in cobalt and copper mining, artisanal miners work in hazardous conditions for meager wages, while the profits flow to Paris and other Western capitals. In Madagascar itself, French firms like 𝗂𝗵𝗄 have been linked to environmental degradation through nickel and cobalt mining, displacing communities and polluting water sources. The return of King 𝗂𝗄𝗄's skull does little to address these ongoing injustices, which continue to rob African nations of their wealth and dignity. France's apologies and symbolic gestures ring hollow when its economic and military stranglehold remains firmly in place. Yet, amidst this exploitation, a new generation of African leaders is rising, unapologetic and unafraid, demanding justice and sovereignty. In Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who seized power in a 2022 coup at the age of 34, has become a symbol of this revolutionary spirit. Traoré has openly criticized France's neo-colonial grip, expelling French troops, rejecting the CFA franc, and aligning with regional powers like Mali and Niger to form the Alliance of Sahel states. His fiery rhetoric and bold actions, such as nationalizing key industries and prioritizing local development, resonate with a youth population tired of foreign domination. Traoré's vision is clear. Africa must control